Hello and welcome to the live chat with Adina Valean, European Commissioner for Transport. Welcome to the studio, Commissioner.
Hello. Thank you.
Mobility and transport are the backbone of our internal market and support the free movement of citizens and goods. This is a very powerful statement that you made at the beginning of your mandate. Now, a few months on, as the world is in the grip of the coronavirus pandemic, I think it's fair to say that transport is one of the lifelines of our economy. This is a citizens' dialogue. It's called Corona Crisis, a Mobility Crisis. And we are live on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn. So far we have received a lot of questions for you, Commissioner, and we're going to take some live ones during this session. So with your permission, I'm going to start with the first one.
Yes, please. Hello, everyone.
We have a question from Niraj on LinkedIn. What is being done to ensure important supply chains like medicines and food keep on functioning even in daring times?
Well, Niraj, I think you have seen what was done, meaning that actually the markets kept receiving the goods. What was important, medicine and equipment, was delivered to hospitals. The flow of goods was maintained, even though since the beginning we have seen unilateral measures taken by member states with closing borders. And what we have done, we put immediately in place a concept of green corridors along the TEN-T networks in Europe. And inside the green corridors, we said in the borders you need to have green lanes, meaning all the trucks will go through smoothly without being held at the borders, so that we will be able to provide goods on the market, components for the industry and companies, and of course very important medicine and equipment for the hospitals.
Niraj, I hope that helps. Commissioner, we have quite a lot of questions related to travel. I mean, non-professional, for leisure or family visits within Europe this summer. Will it be possible, or by air, train or personal car? And I have to say the name of the people who asked these questions. Julia, David, Mike, Elena, Marisole and Wouter on LinkedIn.
Well, I think this is a question everyone has, more or less, nowadays in Europe. We call it, in our working team in the Commission, we call it the exit strategy. How is going to look and when is going to happen after the crisis, or when measures taken by member states will relax a bit. We don't know yet, and we have to make sure that all the health criteria are well respected and in place before any relaxation in travel would happen. I think it's fair to say that, because we need to make sure that all the efforts we have done in Europe with the confinement measures are not in vain, and we are not going to get sick again by traveling too soon. So we have these criteria which are established by specialists in health, and the moment this criteria would be accepted and by member states, then we will have a common approach to what when would be the right time to raise, to allow again travel across border in Europe. But it depends very much on how the health crisis is evolving.
Thank you so much. I hope those who asked this question will be satisfied. Let's hope the measures will be lifted really soon.
I would have loved to give them more certainty, but I think at this stage no one actually knows. But I think member states are looking at measures to lift some of the confinement measures, and we are working on an exit strategy so that we will try to coordinate and harmonize the approach taken by member states.
I understand. There's a follow-up to these questions. Will social distancing continue to be observed, especially on aircraft?
I think I'm, again, not a commissioner for health, but being part of the response team of the Commission, I know for a fact that this health crisis is here to stay for a longer time until we cannot find a good treatment or a vaccine. We expect the crisis to stay with us and the virus to stay with us. And then I think the measures which proven to be efficient, like social distancing, are going to be respected one way or another. And for transport, this is very important. I know a lot of measures have been agreed by the industry in order to keep the travel going. One of them is the social distancing, but apart from that, we have the disinfection of the aircrafts, other protective and health measures to be taken in transport hubs. I think social distancing will be there to stay, and we should and we will issue further guidelines on how this should be applied in various modes of transport.
From the same group of questions, will the internal borders remain closed for a while after the pandemic?
Well, the internal borders should not be closed in a single market. So we know it was the first response to the crisis, but I think these measures are going to be lifted one moment or another. Sooner, I would say, than the pandemic ends, because then we will have to see what is exactly the level of safety for people, and this is health criteria, and the moment in which the borders will open for travel. And I think it's fair to say that the pandemic will take longer than the closure of borders.
I understand. We move now to Facebook. We got a question from Anka on Facebook. Is there an initial evaluation of the coronavirus impact on transport? And if yes, which mode was hit the hardest and which one is getting by?
Well, we have seen from the very moment that transport was among the first to be impacted, and this meant a huge impact on the economy as a whole. From all the modes we have, the most visible impact was on the aviation sector. We have seen everything started with a ban of flights coming from red zones, but then this spreaded, and then in the end we have almost everyone with their aircraft grounded. Nowadays there are only a couple who are still operating and not on all destinations. By one hand. Secondly, we have seen the restriction on travel were impacting other modes, like train, for example. Obviously, this is a mode impacted. Then, with the measures we have taken to continue the free flow of goods in the internal market, for the market, for providing necessary equipment, medicine, so on and so forth, across borders, then we have seen that road transport was less impacted, and I would say also the maritime was less impacted in terms of the traffic of goods, because for people traveling, this is almost close to zero. All this translates in a huge economic impact for the industry. We have some evaluation from each mode. I would say the aviation is the hardest hit, and we don't know when we will start to restart the travel, how the environment of this industry will look as, what business model, who is going to actually survive, what measures the member states would have taken to support various modes and various companies, and then we will have a good evaluation. But this is something we are monitoring all the time, and we will be prepared to use this evaluation for our recovery plans for the transport industry.
Commissioner, I see we receive a lot of messages with thanks for your good job, and this is good to know. We're moving on Twitter now, and Ivan asks, is the Commission planning to present a recovery plan for tourism and air transport?
Yes, actually we are working towards such a plan. actually the recovery, economic recovery of Europe is something the whole Commission is working at as a plan for our single market, for our sectors, which would need a special attention after the crisis in order to be able to provide competitiveness, economic growth, jobs, so on and so forth. And transport is part of these recovery plans, but this will be in time taken. Now for the travel and tourism, I think, if I'm thinking at this summer, we can't say much about this summer, but nevertheless we are working in a small team with some fellow commissioners to provide some guidelines for restarting the travel and tourism for this season, because again we need to take into consideration the health criteria first and foremost, and safety criteria. And then again, for an internal market, it's better to have harmonized approach than see each one taking its own measures, so then for a traveler or for a citizen will be difficult to understand what measures are applying exactly where. So an integrated approach, guidelines, let's see how it evolves with the health crisis.
Thank you. We stay on Twitter. Dan has a question for you. Since social distancing is easier to facilitate on trains compared to planes, do you plan to double down on efforts to create a unified and efficient European high-speed rail network?
Well, with or without the crisis, I would say that the rail network is something, a priority for us. We even proposed that next year, 2021, to be the European year for rail, especially to show focus on this transport mode, which is the most sustainable one. So this is part of our overall strategy. By the end of the year, I am intending still to present a strategy for sustainable and smart mobility. Now I'm intending to add a pillar to it, the recovery and resilience of transport, of mobility and connectivity in Europe, part of this strategy. But nevertheless, a very important mode for us, it is rail. We have this financial instrument, and we are willing to act in this recovery through the multi-annual financial framework. We have this program, Connecting Europe Facility, which makes investment in rail infrastructure, because rail infrastructure is of course essential for the development of high-speed rail network, or for the transport of freight through rail in Europe more than on road or other modes which are less sustainable.
Thank you. There's a question now from Katarina on LinkedIn. If there will be a green transition, she says, this is the time to make our systems more resilient in the future?
Yes, of course. The focus of this Commission is to develop a sustainable and smart economy, sustainable and smart transport modes. And this remains our priority. But of course, we have to deal with it now because of this crisis in etap. So first, now we are in the crisis management mode, but nevertheless, then we'll have to have a recovery, and through the recovery and then the resilience part of our work, we have to have this red line going through, which is sustainability and smart, and this is good for long term. And all the investments we are supposed to make in the future for the recovery and resilience of the sector should be smart and sustainable investments.
Thank you, Commissioner and Katarina, for asking this important question. We have one now from Facebook. Elena asks, is it possible to get some money for improving the Romanian infrastructure?
Romania, as any other member state, is part of the European budget for infrastructure. This is done through Connecting Europe facility projects. Romania is part of it, is using money. Some money were maybe not used, but they were made again available for other projects, so they are not lost. And then through cohesion funds and structural funds, again, together with Connecting Europe facility, which is something we are in charge directly, are money for the infrastructure. So it depends very much on how the government is planning to use and to European funds for the infrastructure project. Not all the projects of infrastructure in Romania were asking European money, so there are various possibilities of financing. And it depends very much on the government how it plans the use of European funds for infrastructure projects.
Thank you. Now there's a lot of questions from the passengers. And I'm going to be the voice of Christelle, who asked on LinkedIn, will you allow airlines to offer vouchers instead of refunds for cancelled flights?
The airlines are allowed to offer vouchers. The key is here if the passenger accepts a voucher. So according to European law, on a cancelled flight, the company needs to make the reimbursement, the rerouting, which is nowadays not possible, but then the reimbursement on various forms, or can offer vouchers or other services, but with the acceptance of the passenger. I know this is a huge problem right now, both for passengers who had seen their travel plans ruined and their money stuck in bought tickets to travel somewhere and the travel didn't happen. So it's a problem for the passengers who have cancelled flights. It's a problem for companies because they have a huge liquidity problem due to their business model, since no more bookings or tickets are bought nowadays. But this is why we put in place various schemes to help the airlines with the liquidity problem. It's the responsibility of the member states to help with this liquidity problem. And I would say that if the vouchers are sufficiently attractive, and if they are why not, like in some member states, insured by the government, then there would be a possibility for the passengers. But according to the law, it's the passenger to decide if he is reimbursed or accepts a voucher or another service offered by the airline.
Thank you. We have a question from Vigaudas on LinkedIn. He asked how the European Commission plans to coordinate member states to open the EU borders for air travel. He also says, thank you for your good job.
Well, thank you very much. We are working on guidelines for we call it an exit strategy, because exactly we want to coordinate on how member states would start reopening the travel and the transport for people. Again, we have to take into consideration the right timing, and I cannot say right now when this is going to start happening, because we have to listen to the advice of the health specialists when it's safe enough to restart this connectivity and mobility of people. Now we are working together with the industry and the stakeholders, depending on the modes, on what practical advice should be taken on board by the industry to organize this transport. And depends from mode to mode. But since I was asked about airlines, I would say, without being preempt what we are going to put on the table, but of course some distancing, rules in the airports, in the aircrafts, to have people in a safe situation, probably wearing protective equipment, disinfection of the aircrafts, of hubs where people are entering, exiting. All this should be part of our guidelines, but I don't want to preempt, and probably by mid-May we can put forward the strategy we are working on, which would explain the situation. We'll come up with some horizontal principles of rules to be respected in the reopening of travel, and then mode by mode with specification, and then you will see it then.
We're looking forward to that. Robert on Facebook. Dear Mrs. Valean, as a Transport Commissioner, what about the Romanian drivers blocked by the Hungarian authorities at Hungarian-Romanian borders?
Well, before I introduce the concept of green corridors and green lanes in the borders, we have seen tremendous, huge queues of trucks, not only at this border, but at several borders in Europe, creating, even closing of a border was creating a domino effect of closing in a row other borders. Now, since then, we introduced this concept with obligations in the green lanes in the borders to give priority to the trucks with clear rules, like, for example, not making the driver to get out of the cabin during the process of passing the border in order to have him more safe. We recommended a time limit of 15 minutes for the whole process crossing the border, and actually it works. It works all over Europe. I have each day a report on how is this going. This is the report from today. And let's see, Hungarian-Romanian border today, it was up to 2 hours. And it's worsening since yesterday, because yesterday was in a better situation. So I would say it's fluctuating depending on borders and on the measures the member states wants to take to be sure that they are checking well also the truck and the driver. But overall, now the flow of goods in Europe is good, and there are some remaining obstacles. And we have created a contact points network from each member state transport ministry, and we are in contact with them each day. So when we see a border going worse, then we call and we ask what is going on there, what's the reason, and so we are trying to tackle it, and sometimes it's working, but it takes a lot of lobbying with member states on their measures at the borders. Hungarian-Romanian border, it's not the only one, but I would say there are some measures that Hungary is taking a bit longer for to check, and it's again a Schengen border, so more papers to be checked and more things than other borders which are inside Europe. And it's not the only one, because you can see also, let's say, with other borders around Switzerland, or it was previous around Austria, some issues, but our experience says that this is going to improve day by day.
Excellent. Time is running out, and the questions keep coming. I'm going to take one now from All Rail, the European Rail Association. They ask on Twitter, should there be specific aid program for rail operators so that they can receive equal help compared to airlines?
Right now, all the help in crisis management mode is channeled through the member states, meaning that that's why the Commission cannot take debt. So we made sure to put in place temporary frameworks, for example, on state aid, so that member states can help with the liquidity and with the wages of employers in various sectors of the economy, including in transport. So it's up to the member states to help the companies right now with liquidity and jobs. And of course, rail will be a very important part of our recovery strategy, which would mean through the multi-annual financial framework to put in place budgets through our projects and programs to help the sector to recover and grow again in a sustainable and smart way.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all your answers for the English audience. Very soon we're going to switch to Romanian because we received a lot of questions from Romania, and it's just fair to answer them in Romanian. Thank you for all our viewers on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And thanks again for your answers. Good luck and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions.